Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
It's impossible to put into words the profound grief and sorrow that our guests and staff share right now.
Names emerge from the deadly helicopter crash near Terrace. 2 of the dead are tourists from Italy. Plus,
maybe it is very difficult for others.
I'd spend a lot more money on Ubers, and I can't drive right now since I'm in a sling.
I understand what the strike is about, so I mean, it's not a big deal in a way.
transit strike day 2. As people in Metro Vancouver struggle to get around, what's next in the labor dispute? And
we just have so many people in the industry that are exhausted, that they're trying to make a living here, but they're not being dealt the right set of hands here.
BC's restaurant industry launches a campaign for help amid higher costs.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. The owner of a heli-skiing operation in BC says the company is heartbroken after a deadly helicopter crash yesterday near Terrace. It killed 3 people, critically injured 2 more, and left 2 others with serious injuries. As Mira Baines reports, investigators are now trying to piece together what led to the tragedy.
Low clouds hang over the mountains surrounding the city of Terrace. North of here, tragedy struck Monday afternoon when a heli-skiing helicopter crashed, killing 3 people and injuring 4 others.
To a layperson, I think I would say it crashed into the side of a mountain. The mountains here are approximately 2,000 meters high.
The company says it's unclear what went wrong, but says a person aboard the downed chopper radioed a distress call to the company.
From a guest that was in the helicopter that was in the incident. This was after the helicopter had impacted. The guest was able to use one of our radios.
CBC News has confirmed 2 of the dead are tourists from Italy. One is Andreas Vidman, an Italian sportswear executive. The other is Heiner Oberauch from the family of an Italian sporting goods company. 4 others, 2 critically injured and 2 in serious condition, were initially taken to a local hospital before being transported south for higher levels of care. The helicopter that crashed was a Koala Augusta A119, contracted from Skyline Helicopters in Kelowna.
The BC Coroner Service, the Transportation Safety Board, and the WorkSafe BC are all engaged along with the Terrace RCMP and are all investigating the cause of the crash.
The region is popular among heli-skiing enthusiasts looking for fresh powder on untouched terrain. Some safety experts say it's too dangerous.
Unfortunately, there's been, I would say, an inordinate number of accidents with heli-skiing aircraft and heli-skiing excursion takers. So that to me is a red flag.
In a statement, Italy's Foreign Affairs Minister said, "I join in the pain of the families who lost their loved ones in the terrible helicopter crash in Canada."
It's impossible to put into words the profound grief and sorrow that our guests and staff share right now.
Mira Baines reporting from Terrace. In the Northwest Territories, officials have confirmed a plane crash there has turned deadly. Earlier this week, an aircraft lost contact outside of Fort Smith. The RCMP, the Canadian Rangers, and the Royal Canadian Air Force all responded. This afternoon, the Territory's chief coroner says the crash killed some of those who were on board. Few other details are known right now. Officials haven't said how many people were actually on board. A CBC News reporter in Fort Smith captured video of 2 parachutists dropping from a Royal Canadian Air Force aircraft over the area. Well, this evening is said to be the final rush hour without Metro Vancouver's main bus services running for now. Buses and C-buses have been parked and docked since Monday morning because of a workers' strike. The job action is scheduled to end at 3 a.m. Wednesday morning. But the job action could escalate. QP 4500 says it will have a hearing at the Labour Board on Monday asking for the right to picket SkyTrain stations. If that's granted, it would leave even fewer options for commuters. And as Justin McElroy explains, the 2 sides seem far apart on a new deal.
At 3 a.m. on Wednesday, Metro Vancouver's bus strike will be over, at least for now. Here are 5 things to know about the job action and where we go from here. First off, what is this about? We're talking about one specific union, CUPE Local 4500, representing about 180 transit supervisors. Now, bus drivers signed a new agreement last year, but the supervisors had their agreement expire. So they currently don't have a contract, and they put picket lines up at certain places that effectively make the bus and C-bus network impossible to function. Second, could this strike spread? It could, actually. A bunch of different unions work for different companies that are part of the TransLink system, and the ones that run under the SkyTrain system have nothing to do with the CUPE 4500 job action. But they have filed an application with the BC Labour Relations Board, asking for the right to picket at SkyTrain systems, which could shut down that service. Now, that application hasn't been heard by the Labour Relations Board yet, but because the union is only putting their job action on hold, they will still have to rule on this, and that decision could have an impact in the future. Which leads us to point 3. The pause on job action is only that, a pause. No agreement has been reached between CUPE and the Coast Mountain Bus Company, which is the technical employer for TransLink, and no negotiations at this point are scheduled. And so there's nothing stopping CUPE from resuming and escalating their action in the future, should they choose. And what is this over? Some labor disputes have to do with benefits or working conditions, but in this case, it seems to be very much about the money. Coast Mountain says they are offering around 14% increases over 3 years for most of the positions in question. And they claim the union is asking for 20 to 25% increases. Now, the union denies it's asking for that much, but it says they don't want to negotiate in public. So finally, what comes next? The government could order binding arbitration or legislate TransLink as an essential service, or the two sides could come to an agreement. But if none of those things happen, a full system shutdown could happen in the future, which means that for the next little while, people who need the B line should keep their own Plan B in mind. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
Dozens of ride-hailing and food delivery drivers, meanwhile, gathered in Surrey this morning at the office of BC's Labour Minister. The drivers rallied for better working conditions and wages, which they say are deteriorating. Some drivers argue they face restrictive conditions and penalties and claim the companies are taking advantage of customers, especially during the transit strike when prices have surged.
We want the government to take action, which I'm sure they will, against these companies, rein them in, and have proper work environment for us and have a proper business environment for the customers.
Uber and Lyft say they have now capped surge pricing during the transit strike and are offering incentives to get more drivers out on the roads. The provincial government's plan to ease BC's housing crisis is raising concerns about potential obstacles. The NDP target has ordered 10 communities to build just over 60,000 homes by 2028. As Belpuri reports, a shortage of city planners may seriously impede that goal.
A soaring skyline suggests otherwise, but Port Moody has a housing shortage. The provincial government wants it to build almost 1,700 homes in the next 5 years. For that to happen, it first has to fill another hole.
We've been hiring retired planners to come in and fill that gap.
City planners are in high demand and short supply. Building applications usually reviewed within 18 months now take twice as long to process.
With larger development applications, developers are being asked to pay the costs of planners who can dedicate themselves to their file.
The planner shortage is widespread.
We're talking about national standards for planners and how we can ensure mobility, transferability of skills.
The Planning Institute of BC reports job postings increased 93% from 2020 to 2021, then another 20% the following year, and again another 20% last year.
Nothing's getting built without planners.
An aging workforce, low pay, and work-life balance are blamed for the shortfall.
A lot of them get burnt out. We see a lot of planners work for maybe 10, 15 years. And they go on and do something else. One of the other things that I think is challenging about keeping planners, particularly in places like the Lower Mainland, is cost of living. It is a good job, but not necessarily if houses are $2 million.
The number of graduates isn't enough to keep up with the number of jobs.
They're not really supporting cities to make that change, so it's great to say that we need more housing, but we need more support to make that change possible.
Training more people is one solution, but the NDP says reforming the process is another.
We need to find more efficiencies in approvals. We need to digitize processes so that that workload on individual people can be less.
Amid the scarcity of planners, Port Moody has an abundance of plans. The largest development in its history will build 5,500 new homes over 12 years.
We have a lack of capacity to take advantage fully of the tools and incentives that the province is providing to us. And that is costly. That is having a direct impact on the affordability of homes being built.
Without enough planners, though, the housing mandates may well be just ambitious targets. Belle Puri, CBC News, Port Moody.
Well, the stench has faded. It appears some Metro Vancouverites are still fuming after a refinery incident this weekend in Burnaby that blanketed the region in an acrid odor. Two online letter-writing campaigns are calling for greater accountability over what happened. On Sunday, the Parkland Fuel Refinery says it experienced an issue with one of its processing units, causing the stench. One of the letters asks the province to look into what happened. The other is critical over what it argues was a delay in warning the public.
Undisclosed chemicals spread across the city, filling people's homes, making them cough, making their eyes water, making their throat burn. And there's been no disclosure on what incident caused this to happen or what in particular was released.
Metro Vancouver says the odor contained elevated contaminant levels but did not break pollution standards. BC's restaurant industry is again raising alarms about survival, saying there could be mass closures in the coming months without some form of relief. As Michelle Gassoub explains, they warn a perfect storm of economic conditions is making the business untenable.
Whether it's a burger joint or a well-loved sushi spot, there's a chance your favorite restaurant is struggling. Industry experts warn many closures could be coming.
I think we'll see in the next 6 months a net decrease of restaurants in the province because of the weakness, the financial weakness, and the impact of CBC loans, and the fact that, I think a lot of businesses are wondering, when will I ever be able to make a profit?
According to Restaurants Canada, 50% of food service businesses in BC are unprofitable, and restaurant bankruptcies are up 48% over 10 months. Now they've launched a campaign called Save BC Restaurants, hoping to ease the economic pain.
Prices are going up faster than our ability to raise our prices on menus, and then our menu prices kind of get capped because who wants to eat a $30 hamburger, right?
That eye-watering inflation isn't the only challenge restaurants face. Now that they have to start repaying the CBC loans taken out during the pandemic, they're likely to feel even more pinched.
We thought when we came out of the pandemic there would be an explosion on the upside, on the sales side. It didn't happen. Most of the operators I deal with and chat with every day of competing concepts kind of affirm that it's been a tough go for everybody out there.
The campaign is asking the province to remove some of the red tape that makes operating in BC so expensive.
It takes months to get a liquor license in British Columbia, which is costly for anybody coming into the industry.
Hoping to keep afloat an industry that employs over 185,000 workers across this province. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
Heads up for drivers, a large section of Highway 1 east of Metro Vancouver is closing overnight. Highway 1 through the Fraser Canyon is going to close in both directions from 9 p.m. until 5 a.m. Wednesday morning. The Transportation Safe Ministry says it's removing a temporary bridge at the Falls Creek construction site that's just south of Lytton, and the closure runs to Hope. People driving between the interior and the Lower Mainland can take either Highway 3 or Highway 5 as alternatives. There's a live look at Grouse Mountain tonight, where rain has fallen for most of the day. Conditions a bit socked in, wet, rainy to say the least. There has been plenty of snow in the North Shore Mountains recently. Grouse says it's gotten 42 centimeters in the last 7 days. But warmer and rainier weather is on the way. And here now is to tell us how much we're going to get. Darius Madavi, warm, rainy weather meant to get even warmer. What's in the forecast?
Lots of rain, Dan, and that's even true for the local mountains because freezing levels are quite high and are expected to stay quite high through the end of this week. So you can take a look at the temperatures across the province over the next couple days. This is tomorrow. We're staying fairly consistent over the next few days, maybe coming up a couple degrees across the province, but for the most part, staying right where we are, just a couple degrees for the south coast above seasonal, across much of southern BC actually, and a similar story for parts of north of the Caribou region, but not everywhere. In the northeast, still a little bit chillier than usual. Now, in terms of precipitation, this is just a broad look at what is heading our way. You can see plenty of snow and even, plenty of rain and even a bit of snow at higher elevations coming to the south coast. I know that's not the most easy to follow look, but basically the message of this board is just there's lots of rain. There's many systems that are going to be passing through, dropping lots of rain, and it's going to be somewhat intermittent, but not really. Now, one thing I've been playing with showing is the freezing levels, and so this is not really the best way to do it. This is trying to show you where temperatures are going to be above zero over the next few days, but not the best. But in terms of precipitation, you can see even on the local mountains, lots of rain and not so much snow. So we're going to be seeing, for the most part, rain falling a few times overnight. We might get low enough that we see some snow fall. But for the most part, here in Vancouver and on the local mountains, it's a rainy one ahead, even as we do get a couple breaks. Not going to see much sun either.
Okay, we'll check in later. Thanks, Darius.
Thanks, Dan.
A hockey team from the North Shore is heading to the International Pee Wee Tournament in Quebec. The Winterhawks, the first ever all-female team from Western Canada. They currently sit atop their league. The team has 15 girls between 11 and 12 years old. They will head east for the tournament in February. For the girls and their coach, this is a dream come true.
When I announced it to them this year that we were accepted in, the screams were deafening and beautiful at the same time. It was a really exciting moment.
The Winterhawks are one of 12 female teams to play in the tournament. The Invictus Games will be kicking off next year, I should say, in BC. Goodness knows it's not next week. And new artwork has been unveiled. A blanketing ceremony was held to honor the work of 4 artists, hosted by the Lillooet, Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. The artists collaborated to create the new visual identity for the Games. The 8-day international sports competition for wounded and sick military personnel kicks off in February of 2025. And for the first time, the Games feature winter and indoor adaptive sports. Ahead of a provincial election, what impact might AI have on the campaign trail? We're going to take a look at deep fakes and manipulation. That's next. Thanks for joining us on our commercial-free live stream tonight. Canada Post is honoring North America's first black female newspaper publisher. A new stamp featuring Ann Shadd Cary was unveiled today. She started a paper in Windsor, Ontario in 1853. It was published in Toronto until 1860. The CBC's Meg Roberts has her story.
I'd never heard of her before.
It was a trip to the museum in North Buxton, a community located outside Chatham, Ontario, known as one of the last stops on the Underground Railroad, that Adrienne Shadd found out about her great-great-great-aunt, Ann Shadd Cary.
I was absolutely astounded.
Astounded at the magnitude of her ancestor's life. Born to a family of Delaware abolitionists in 1823, Ann Shadd Cary moved to what is now Windsor, Ontario, opening a school for the children of freedom seekers. Later, she would become the first black woman in North America to publish and edit a newspaper, the Provincial Freeman.
She seemed fearless in her endeavors. She didn't seem to be afraid to criticize black male leaders, white male leaders.
Going by her initials to not disclose her gender, she encouraged black immigration to Canada through the publication, speaking candidly about slavery in the mid-1800s.
And she is certainly someone whose story needs to be better known. This is the only photo we have.
Family members like Irene Moore Davis know the impacts Shadd Cary has had on the nation's history. Like many relatives, she's dedicated her career to telling it. And she's hoping with the help of Canada Post, more Canadians will get to learn it too. In honor of Black History Month, Canada Post has unveiled its newest stamp.
It means so much pride for our family.
The stamp was collaborated on by family members who gathered to see the final product in Chatham, Ontario, but also for a rare opportunity to reunite.
it's nice to see people and just enjoy the moment and celebrate the iconic Ann Shadd Cary.
Ann Shadd's family members celebrating the work she left behind, but it's with their help her legacy of activism and education lives on. Meg Roberts, CBC News, Chatham, Ontario.
This next clip sounds like U.S. President Joe Biden telling potential voters to stay clear of today's primary election in New Hampshire. Have a listen.
We know the value of voting Democratic when our votes count. It's important that you save your vote for the November election. We'll need your help in electing Democrats up and down the ticket. Voting this Tuesday only enables the Republicans in their quest to elect Donald Trump again.
But that is not Joe Biden. It's an AI-generated voice and was sent out on a robocall just ahead of today's crucial primary vote. The use of AI-generated audio, video, and images, meanwhile, is a rising problem for Canada's cyber intelligence agency, the Communication Security Establishment. It's warning that AI technology is advancing too quickly to detect every single deepfake online. And it's inevitable some will fall for deepfakes before they cast a ballot. Now, ahead of October's provincial election here in BC, we wanted to talk deepfakes and politics here. Joining us now for some more context and expertise is Sun Ha Hong, SFU Assistant Professor of Communication. Thank you very much for coming in.
Hi, great to be here.
So, deepfakes are just basically the latest in a surge of online disinformation. What makes them so successful?
They're so successful in part because they're able to use text, images, videos, and a combination of them. So it's one thing to see something online and then check it on Google or somewhere else. Mm-hmm. But if you get that kind of robocall on your phone and then you hang up, you have no way to go back and get that data and to go over it a second time. So it's really relying on this idea that people are going to very quickly watch videos, listen to audio, and then take that away with them without being able to double check.
And it's probably gotten a lot easier for the perpetrators who are doing this to simply put them together, right? The technology has gotten better?
The technology hasn't necessarily gotten better, but it has always gotten cheaper and more accessible. So it's not always the most latest cutting-edge pieces of technology that are the most dangerous. It's the point at which they become cheap and fast enough that almost anybody out there with the computer can set about creating these things.
When it comes to people getting snafu'd, we know that's already happened in some cases. What are some of those steps that people can do to better protect themselves?
I wish I could tell you that there's, 1, 2, 3 things we could do to become absolutely safe. Unfortunately, even myself, when I think about my own personal interaction with information online, I know that sometimes I'm also going to get fooled. There's no surefire way, especially as the technology evolves. So I think one thing we can do is look out for actually some of the very basic details. What we're seeing now is a lot of videos and photographs of wars and wildfires that are actually from movies or even video games or from 10 years ago. And that's one of the prime ways in which misinformation spreads. So even if you can't tell the latest and greatest pieces of deceptive technology, doing some of that basic checking can help. And then I would say just prioritize and not get carried away with every single piece of, especially emotionally activating kinds of content, things that make us outraged and upset. I think that's where we have to slow down a little bit because they want you to get carried away.
Is there a limit, though, to how much people will be able to recognize a deep fake and essentially have the media smarts or literacy to say, oh, no, that's fake?
There is absolutely no surefire way. I could take any one of my colleagues who are world experts on this information, and I would say to you, if I have enough time to send them enough emails and Facebook posts and Instagram posts, eventually I will be able to fool them because there are so many vectors of attack and they're changing all the time.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's one thing, I think we have an example we're going to show. It's one thing for people to be able to create deep fakes. Another when political parties started doing that. The GOP created this video depicting what would happen if Joe Biden is re-elected as president in November. Let's take a look at this.
This just in, we can now call the 2024 presidential race for Joe Biden.
My fellow Americans.
This morning, an emboldened China invades Taiwan.
Financial markets are in free fall as 500 regional banks have shuttered their doors.
Border agents were overrun by a surge of 80,000 illegals yesterday evening.
Officials closed the city of San Francisco this morning, citing the escalating crime and fentanyl crisis.
Who's in charge here? It feels like the train is coming off the tracks.
So you have emotion, you have violence, you have images that can't be verified in some cases. We just see an image of San Francisco. We don't know how much that's been generated. Does this still have an impact, do you think, if it's labeled and marketed like that?
I don't think labeling has much of an impact. I mean, if you think about text, we don't allow politicians to say whatever they want and then just have a little disclaimer saying, by the way, this may be fake. We would say there's no reason to allow that. It's still harmful, and some people are going to miss that warning. And so I just don't think, especially when you watch that video for 5, 10, 20 seconds, maybe on your small mobile phone, what is the watermark really going to do? That's a tiny little Band-Aid over a very, very large problem.
Lastly, we appreciate your time. What should authorities, communication security establishment, federal government, and other agencies be doing right now, do you think, in order to combat concerns about the impact of deepfakes and other things like this?
Short term, already states and countries out there are moving to create 30, 60, 90-day bans on political campaigns using deepfakes in any way. I think that is one small thing we can do. But in the long term, this problem is going to happen again and again every year. And we need to have a larger conversation about having stronger, comprehensive regulation that doesn't just stop deepfakes that we have now, but the ones that are going to be coming along year after year.
Sun Ha Hong, Assistant Professor in Communication at SFU. We appreciate your time and your expertise. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Unreasonable. A ruling from a federal court says Ottawa's use of the Emergencies Act against convoy protests violated protesters' charter rights. Why the federal government plans to appeal after this.
Nixon Valeur and his mom are desperate to save their family. Valeur's 6 brothers and their children all live in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. Since the assassination of the country's president in 2021, Haiti has fallen into chaos. Restricted access to food, water, and medical care, cholera outbreaks, and a rise in rampant gang violence.
Then ask people to give money. If they don't give money, they will kill them. They don't care. They can't kill the entire family, gun down the entire family. And then so my family right now, they can't even sleep.
It's a situation the international community has been keeping a close eye on, including Canada. In November, the Department of Immigration launched a new program to welcome 11,000 foreign nationals from Colombia, Venezuela, and Haiti.
It does recognize the importance of family reunification and indeed our important humanitarian ongoing commitments.
Valeur and the rest of his family already here submitted applications immediately. Each person needing paperwork, including police certificates, travel documents, even health screening. None necessarily easy to get in a country like Haiti, and expensive too. But despite paying thousands of dollars and uploading dozens of documents, each application was returned incomplete. And it's now too late for Valeur to resubmit because the program has hit capacity.
I feel really speechless, useless, because I don't have any power to do anything anymore.
This immigration lawyer says there are often too many barriers for programs like this one. Physical disabilities, language barriers, finances, all hurdles for potential applicants.
It's a matter of procedural fairness. The question is, for any application process, it ought to be designed in a way that the individuals do have a fair chance.
A spokesperson with Immigration, Refugee and Citizenship Canada says they can be flexible with applications, but only before a program reaches its cap. Nicole Williams, CBC News, Ottawa.
To a major ruling from the Canadian courts today. A federal judge has decided the government's historic use of the Emergencies Act to clear the 2022 convoy protests was not justified. The invocation of the act gave police extraordinary powers to remove and arrest protesters. The government argues doing so was a matter of national security. As Kate McKenna tells us, the judge says they went too far.
Ottawa's weeks-long gridlock warranted the government's attention, according to the federal court. But using the Emergencies Act to deal with it was not justified.
This is a huge victory for Canada and for everybody who cares about rights and freedoms.
So it was a vindication as somebody who really believes in our constitutional rights and believes that for them to be meaningful, they need to be honestly grappled with.
Justice Richard Mosley ruled that the federal government violated 2 sections of the charter. Freezing bank accounts was an unreasonable search and seizure, and the nationwide order to stop protesting violated the right to free expression. One key factor, Ontario and Alberta had already shut down border protests, demonstrating it could be done.
So we are aware of the court decision.
Ottawa stands by its use of the act.
We do not agree with this decision, and respectfully, we will be appealing it.
This ruling had a different conclusion than the head of the Public Commission found last year, but both arbiters agree there's room for interpretation.
I do not come to this conclusion easily, as I do not consider the factual basis for it to be overwhelming. Reasonable and informed people could reach a different conclusion than the one I have arrived at.
Unlike his findings, the federal court ruling is legally binding.
When a federal government is determining next time whether it should use the Emergencies Act, it is Justice Mosley's decision that binds them and sets the framework, not the findings in the Rouleau Commission report.
Some people involved in the protests are calling this a win.
It resonates as pleasant news, but I would love to know what the outcome of this ruling is. Will there be consequence for Trudeau, Freeland, and Mendocino? That's yet to play out.
Shots were fired and a Molotov cocktail was thrown at Edmonton City Hall today. A council meeting was recessed immediately and the building evacuated. Police arrested one person and searched the building. No injuries have been reported. The mayor and city councillors were in a meeting of the Emergency Advisory Committee when loud bangs were heard inside. A Quebec judge has given a class action lawsuit against the Quebec government the green light. It alleges that the province failed to protect residents in public long-term care facilities during the first waves of the pandemic. Quebec's care homes were hit very hard by COVID. And as Melissa Francois explains, more than 5,000 people died during the period covered by the lawsuit.
I'm still mad because it was avoidable.
Jean-Pierre Daubois launched a class action after his mother died at the Sainte-Dorothée Long-Term Care Center in 2020.
I was able to see by myself the disastrous situation that was inside the CHSLD at that time.
118 long-term care homes are included in the class action lawsuit authorized by a Superior Court judge. Daubois and his lawyer alleged that the province improvised its response during the first year of the pandemic, which contributed to thousands of deaths.
This tragedy was not simply what we would call a thunderstorm in a blue sky. It was something that was the result of a series of negligent practices.
The suit seeks compensation of $100,000 for residents who were infected by COVID-19 during the first year of the pandemic, $40,000 for those who were not infected, and additional amounts for the loved ones of those who died. Yann Perez lost both of his parents at a facility in Lachine.
I'm pleased that the action is moving forward. I can't say that I'm surprised. I am cautiously optimistic that the provincial and federal governments will take meaningful steps to better protect the elderly. We feel that there really was negligence in senior care at the time. In each case, my mother and father were isolated in their rooms for weeks, and the staff brought COVID-19 virus into their rooms.
This patient's rights advocate says this is an important step and says there is still more the government needs to do.
Is the expulsion of caregivers, family caregivers. That created a lot of abandonment, a lot of death, not from COVID, from lack of hydration, lack of food, to the extent that now we have asked the government to declare caregivers to be part of the essential services in case of pandemic.
The allegations still need to be proven in court. Tens of thousands of people could potentially be covered by the lawsuit. Mélissa François, CBC News, Montreal.
Animal shelters across the country are struggling to find homes for a growing number of abandoned puppies. As Erin Collins explains, interest in adoption has dropped sharply, and inflation has made pet ownership less affordable.
Like feeding fish?
It's called a puppy party. Dozens of pups to play with, all looking for homes.
I didn't think that I wanted to completely adopt when I got here, but I fell in love with her, so we'll see.
Are you going to leave with this dog today?
Maybe. It's a possibility.
Yeah. This many puppies in this shelter, unheard of just a few years ago.
Having a puppy in shelter was very rare, and if you did have one, people were clamoring at the door to come and adopt that animal.
The number of puppies here up 200% from last year, a trend reported by shelters across the country since the height of the pandemic.
People wanted to get an animal into their home, and so people started breeding to fill that demand. That demand doesn't exist anymore, so we would really love the breeders who are doing this to stop.
Rising costs and a shortage of rental housing makes owning a dog harder too.
Buying all of the stuff that we need for her today if we do get her. And then also in 4 months from now, we're trying to decide where we want to live too.
One potential adopter on the fence, but nearby, a match.
I have Dystria.
This family getting a bit bigger today.
Look, they're so cute. They're so tiny. They need a home, people to love them. Yeah.
But this adoption is just a drop in the bucket for a growing problem. Of the 30 puppies available on this day, only 8 found a new home. Erin Collins, CBC News, Calgary.
Hamas has rejected Israel's proposed 2-month ceasefire. Israel says it's willing to trade Palestinian prisoners, including top Hamas officials, for the hostages being held in Gaza. As Sasha Petrusik reports, it comes as Israel mourns its single deadliest day of fighting since the war began in October.
In the rain of Tel Aviv, they marched and mourned,
In Jerusalem, they remembered a 23-year-old reservist with prayers and honors. He died on a dangerous mission with no chance to tell his family.
We didn't know he went in. We didn't know we were supposed to worry about him.
After the deadliest day of conflict for Israel, 24 soldiers were buried today. 21 of them died in a single incident just inside the border with Gaza when mines they were setting exploded, hit by a Hamas rocket. I grieve for every one of them in this unjust war, says Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, a war he vows to continue until total victory. In previous conflicts, high Israeli casualties have turned the public against wars. Less so now, it seems.
That's horrible. That's horrendous. It's terrible. You know, it's our sons, it's our brothers. It's terrible. But we got to do what we got to do so that October 7th doesn't happen again.
Allahu Akbar. There was grieving in Gaza, too, as Palestinian families buried their dead on the grounds of a hospital. It's too dangerous to use cemeteries. Southern Gaza is the scene of heavy fighting, with almost 2 million displaced Palestinians caught with nowhere to hide. With Qatar mediating, talks continue, looking for a ceasefire and a release of Israeli hostages held in Gaza.
I can't give you odds on if and when we'll be able to get there, but the conversations are very sober and serious about trying to get another hostage deal in place.
Complicated by Hamas's insistence on a permanent ceasefire before anyone is released, and Israel's new bottom line that a ceasefire is impossible while Hamas remains in power. Sasha Petrusek, CBC News, Toronto.
A controversial Hindu temple opened yesterday in northern India. It's built on land where an historic mosque once stood. The site has long been a religious flashpoint among India's Hindu majority and the Muslim minority population. As Salima Shivji shows us, the event is being heavily promoted by India's populist leader as he seeks re-election.
A raw display of Hindu faith lining the streets of Ayodhya. Thousands of devotees have descended on the holy city. Glory to Lord Ram, they shout, one of Hinduism's most revered deities. But the new temple dedicated to him is steeped in controversy. Built on the ruins of a centuries-old mosque demolished by a Hindu mob in 1992. An illegal act that sparked riots that killed 2,000 people, mostly Muslims. Millions in India believe this was where Ram was born and that there was a temple here first. As India's prime minister led the consecration of the temple, he leaned into those emotions. Our Ram has arrived today after waiting for centuries, Narendra Modi said. Missing from the crowd are leaders of India's political opposition, who accuse Modi of manipulating a religious event for a political boost with his Hindu base. Modi's promotion of the temple, another sign for many observers of Hindu dominance in a country that has secularism enshrined in its constitution.
It kind of sends a very strong message down to the Hindu voter that this is a party and a government that protects and furthers Hindu interests.
But for those who've been camping out for days close to the temple, there's already fervor and faith in Modi. He's made our dreams come true with the temple, says Parya Garg. It's about pride in being Hindu.
In the shadow of this new temple and the mass celebrations, Ayodhya's Muslim community is quietly resigned to being sidelined in the city they've lived in for generations. Still, there's a sense of unease.
The mosque to replace the one destroyed, ordered by India's top court, is stalled. The land allotted, isolated, and far from the city's center.
I have prepared it after.
Khalik Ahmad Khan is a litigator who carefully documented the Muslim deaths in Ayodhya after the mosque was razed.
This is the fear. This is the way we fear. This may happen, violence may happen after 22nd January. And Muslims are helpless.
He says for his community, there's little faith left in India's institutions. With religion and politics deeply intertwined, and an election this spring that's likely to further divide the country. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Ayodhya, Uttar Pradesh.
A world first, a vaccine for one of the most severe and deadly diseases. You'll want to see this.
This is where you will find Gordie Cox for hours at a time every winter. He lives across the street and has been shoveling the snow, flooding the ice, and even hanging up lights for 28 years.
I'm almost like a kid in a candy store. I can't wait for the first snowfall. I can't wait for when the temperature dips to come out here and start preparing for the next season.
But there hasn't been a rink here for the last 2 winters. The pond had filled with sediment and weeds, and there wasn't enough water to form ice.
Yeah, people were really concerned in Stratford, and like I said, we wouldn't have been the first community in PEI to lose a very cherished pond.
It was dredged last summer, and the water started to rise again.
It's kind of magical. Like I said, I live around the corner, and you go by it about 500 times, in 2 weeks. And there's always somebody out there, somebody pushing the snow out of the way. When he got lights, it was really amazing. Cords running across the street and everything, and it's mythical, almost iconic,
The rinks have been featured in artwork, and Zach McEwen, one of the kids who grew up playing hockey here, is now in the NHL. Cox says he is now getting to meet the second generation learning to skate here on the pond.
It's really neat. The other day, there was a guy down here. He said he remembered when he was younger, he always down here, and as he said, on Gordie's pond. But and now he had his 4-year-old with him.
The official name is Moore's Pond, but most in the neighborhood call it Gordie's Rink.
That's what everybody calls it. You tell people you're going over to Moore's Pond, they say, "Where are you, Alberton or someplace?" But you say you're going by Gordie's Rink, and everybody knows what it is, yeah. And he's just Gordie,
Gordie Cox retired a couple of years ago from his job as a school counselor. He was elected in 2022 to Stratford Town Council, but says he still has plenty of time for the rinks.
As long as I'm living right across the street, I think I'll always be over here. I have no plans in the near future of stepping away, yeah.
Nancy Russell, CBC News, Stratford.
So I know when I really like a song, if within the first 3 seconds, I'm already vibing to it.
Hey, I'm Rohith Joseph. Vibin' is the new show all about discovering great new songs and fresh artists from across BC and beyond.
It's not one person dictating what good music is, it's the community sharing what good music is.
Stream Vibin' on CBC Listen.
Science and climate specialist Darius Madavi joins us now with the full forecast, and we're just going to stay damp.
Yes, that's right. There we go. My job's done.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Wet for the next few days, basically. We get a few breaks in there, but it's hard to tell exactly when they're going to come. Tomorrow, it looks like we might get a break somewhere in the evening time. Still not going to see, well, not the sun because sunset will have happened, but also not really much sky to be seen because it'll still be very cloudy. Now, rain going to continue right through the weekend, and you can see already lots of activity today across the south coast. We've seen rain heavy at times across much of both the Vancouver, southern parts of Vancouver Island and here on the lower mainland. And if you take a look at our accumulation map, plenty of snow coming for the interior over the next 48 hours. I should mention that for parts of the Okanagan Valley, specifically places like Kelowna and Vernon, it's going to come as rain rather than snow because those freezing levels are quite high. And so some showers here tomorrow, but not looking like too much. Most of the rain is falling on the south coast and maybe the north coast as well. And then you can see this is the rainfall totals, not snowfall. You can see lots of rain coming, especially on the west coast of the island. So lots of activity happening over the next 48 hours. But as those systems continue to roll through, so far at least, it doesn't look like we're expecting any major impacts or windstorms, but that could change. Now, in terms of where that system is going to come, you can see lots of activity happening. We had that first bit of rain, a bit of a break overnight tonight, but then it comes back in force early in the morning, and then plenty of snow for the interior as well, again, with the exception of places like some parts of southern BC, like the Okanagan, and then you can see plenty more activity as that system does continue to roll through. And then the next wave, despite a little bit of a break Friday afternoon, because we just have some periodic rain on Friday, we're going to see more rainfall pretty much right through the weekend. So like Dan said, it's going to be a damp one. Now, if we roll this forward, you can see our conditions for tomorrow. Plenty of rain across parts of the south. You can see some places we're expecting a mix of rain and snow, places like the Cariboo region and Whistler. But for the most part in the south, we're looking at rain and then a bit of snow for the north. But for the most part, anywhere north of the Cariboo region, it's really just a small chance of anything. And in the northeast, not really anything at all. Now, I just want to show this precipitation map one more time because you can see really a mix of snow and rain sometimes on the mountain, but not really any opportunity for that straight snow that we're hoping for, at least skiers and snowboarders might be hoping for, because it's really a rainy forecast with freezing levels sticking around 1,200 to 1,500 meters, Dan. So not good news for the local mountains.
A lot of colors in there, man.
Thank you.
That was a cool graphic.
I love colors.
Yeah, they're cool. The world's first vaccine program against malaria has begun in Cameroon. It's expected to save thousands of children's lives across Africa. As Lauren Pelly shows us, kids under 5 represent 80% of the 600,000 people who are killed by the illness in Africa every year.
A historic moment in the fight against malaria. Health officials in Cameroon just launched the world's first vaccination campaign against the deadly disease, providing shots to the country's tiniest patients.
This vaccine rollout means that a world where children no longer die from a simple mosquito bite is within our reach.
The immunization program targets 6-month-olds and was years in the making. Millions of children elsewhere in Africa have already gotten doses in a pilot project, which led to dramatic drops in severe infections and a 13% drop in deaths among eligible children.
This has been a long road, and so it makes this day perhaps even more significant.
Across Africa, malaria typically kills hundreds of thousands of people every year, and most of those deaths are children under the age of 5. The vaccine is rolling out at a time when global malaria cases are on the rise. There were nearly 250 million cases in 2022, 5 million more than the year before, and far above pre-pandemic tallies. Scientists pin the rise on climate change, as changes in temperature, humidity, and rainfall can all influence the survival of malaria-carrying mosquitoes. That makes wiping out malaria a daunting task. The other challenge is hesitancy. This resident of Douala in Cameroon said health officials need to better inform the community, as only a handful of people showed up on day one to get a shot.
I think it's going to take a lot of support and guidance and hard work from countries and partners to ensure that it's successful.
A total of 20 African countries plan to introduce immunization programs this year, and a second vaccine that's even more effective is on the way as well. The question now is just how many people will get these long-awaited shots. Lauren Pelly, CBC News, Toronto.
This is not your normal downward dog. Up next, the latest trend in yoga. Yeah, it's what you think.
Practice slides may be
games in a row?
Yeah, you were just barely back 4.
Yeah, I'll throw like
a couple feet off.
a foot line.
Mine looks good.
There you can go.
Oh.
Right here, right here. Right here, right
Clean,
here.
clean.
Really good. Yay!
약간만 만져봐.
웨이트 비슷해.
가자. 웨이트 좋아.
자신 있게 클린해. 자신 있게 클린해. 자신 있게 클린해.
오케이. 혹시 모르니까 닦아. 지금 많이.
Whoa! Yes!
Whoa, whoa.
Whoa, whoa, whoa!
Carl!
Cut!
놔두면 돼. 놔두면 돼.
Will face Turkey. On sheet C, Norway will compete Japan, and on sheet D, Sweden will play. 7라운드가 진행됩니다. A 시트에서는 중국과 미국, B 시트에서는 뉴질랜드와 튀르키예, C 시트에서는 노르웨이.
You've heard of yoga classes with dogs, but how about yoga classes for dogs?
Well, Doga Yoga has taken over Dog's Den Training School in Regina. Check it out.
Bang.
Stay. Let's do a power up. Back to that sit. Stand. I myself do yoga, and I find it very, very beneficial. So what I did was I looked at all the human poses, and I modified them for dogs. And then we train the dogs to do those poses. There's a lot of handler mechanics that are involved, but there's also dogs' core strength and their understanding of how to follow a lure, get into position, and hold.
Stay. Yes.
They're very, very relaxed. They're very calm. I do a lot of this with dogs that are not confident or dogs that are reactive. And I believe that by doing that, what happens is these dogs end up having a sense of autonomy, self-awareness, and agency. And anybody who's got self-awareness, autonomy, and agency is automatically more confident and centered and focused.
So my dog is Cora. She is 5.5 years old and she is a golden retriever. This is something, as Cora's been aging, we just want to keep her limber and flexible and to ensure, her mobility stays strong as she gets older.
Get that other leg up. Yes.
All right.
Good girl.
She's become a very trusting dog. Our relationship, more trust has been built between us. So she's more responsive because of that. As a golden retriever, you can tell she wants to interact with everyone and all of the dogs. Her focus is playing. So for her to be in these classes, she has developed so much self-control and sort of discipline.
They're happier, they're more reliable, they're not so afraid, they're not so reactive because they understand how their body works and they're centered, and that centered feeling that they get has a ripple effect in the rest of their life.
So your dog can fetch, mine has abs.
Oh, that's not bad.
Not bad.
I feel like we should do a whole show that's just dog stories. I would love that.
We're getting there. This year's Oscar nominations have been announced, and it is a huge day for Oppenheimer.
The biopic of the father of the atomic bomb leads the field with 13 nods, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Cinematography.
And I know what it means if the Nazis have a bomb.
Killers of the Flower Moon landed 11 nominations, including Best Picture and Best Actress. Ryan Gosling is among several Canadians recognized this year. He's been nominated for Best Supporting Actor for his role as Ken in Barbie.
Meanwhile, Toronto-born musician Robbie Robertson is being recognized posthumously for his work on the score for Killers of the Flower Moon, and Canadian-Korean filmmaker Celine Song's debut, Past Lives, snagged Best Picture and Best Original Screenplay nods. Some good representation there. You've seen any of the nods for Best Picture?
Only Barbie.
That's okay.
But twice.
Many people do. Oh, yeah. 2 times.
Yeah, you.
Nice. Saw Oppenheimer. Loved it. Need to see it again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, well, thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
We will have your next local news at 11 o'clock right after the National. We'll see you then.